Good evening and welcome to the Cover 1 Roundup. I am your host, David Fox. With me, as usual, is my co-host, UberHansen, and we are here this week because we are like this close. We're like that close. If you're an audio listener, my fingers are very, very close together to actually being able to talk about real football things in the year of our Lord 2024, and I am actually very excited at that prospect. It has been a long journey, a very long process to get here, as it often is. I don't know how this particular offseason has been for you. I mean, you're always arguing with idiots online,
Yeah.
so I don't know if that makes it easier, more fun, more entertaining. Some days probably more than others. But for me, this offseason seemed to go by pretty quickly. I think part of that is because I started watching baseball.
Okay.
Since the Phillies are like actually good this year, it's like, oh, okay, maybe I'll actually, watch some games now. But I was like, oh, we're already at training camp now. I was like, oh, okay, cool. But regardless of that, any extended period of time without football is too much in my mind.
Yeah,
But we're here.
I'm with you. I'm with you 100%. And this off season somehow flew by, but also felt like it's still July. We still have a bit to go until we get to see legit football. But the fact that there's going to be Bills players on the field, I believe, starting tomorrow, all together.
Yes.
That's pretty awesome. And we're going to start getting some news that actually matters now, not just clickbait nonsense. We'll still get the clickbait nonsense. We will still get that, but we're going to get things that actually matter. And I'm really, really excited about that.
It will be a delight, at least for those of us who actually want to talk about real football stuff and not just a bunch of clickbaity stuff. So I'm very, very excited. I hope the rest of you are very, very excited. Sweet Spike here says, let's go, which is, I share that sentiment greatly, so I'm with you there. It's gonna be good. I'm very excited. I am also very excited to talk about One Pass. Folks, read the shirt. One Pass, right here. It is your best way of being able to not only stay connected with us here at Cover 1, but it is the best source for Bills information, for Bills analysis, for just talking with Bills like-minded people. It is just a great group of people. You get to have access to our Discord server now. We're now on Discord. Used to be on Slack. Now we are on Discord. It really is a great community. It's a great group of people. We talk about all sorts of things, Bills related, not Bills related, life related, all sorts of stuff. It is a really great group. You get access to all sorts of different things. It is just, it's really hard to describe exactly how great all of this is. And the best part is, at least for us, you get to support us directly. You're not going through YouTube and getting whatever earnings you're getting from that. You're supporting us directly, and we really appreciate all of you who are One Pass subscribers. And if you're just getting tired of dealing with social media and all the sort of people that tend to populate those spaces, especially during the season, during a game, go over, join One Pass. You will be able to join a great group of people and have your game day experience greatly enhanced by that. You also get you might hypothetically get access to certain bits and pieces of Bills news and information that otherwise would be, not available to other people. But that's all hypothetical. Who's to say that that's actually what goes on at Cover 1 One Pass? So sign up today. It is absolutely worth it. It is the best $60 you will spend with regards to that. We also have our wonderful sponsors over at Underdog Fantasy. Folks, it is that time. Now that there is actual football stuff happening, that also means there is actual fake football stuff happening in fantasy football. So if that one home league each year is not enough for you, don't worry. Underdog Fantasy has you covered. It is all the fun of drafting your own players, without the waivers and lineup decisions. That's what best ball drafts are for. If you go to Underdog Fantasy and use the promo code COVER1 when signing up to make your first deposit, Underdog will match that deposit up to $100. That is a free $100 in free play when you use the promo code COVER1. Sign up today. Start winning today. The comments are rolling in. Folks, John Robert clarifying. Training camp starts Wednesday. Julian, hey gents, new subscriber to the Go. Oh, thank you. New subscriber. Thank you. Always appreciate it. Go Bills. I have a sneaky feeling we end up with a better squad than last year for some reason. No matter what the national narrative is at the moment, we will probably talk about perception of the Bills as we go along here. Sweet Spike. Oh yeah, of course. Pointing out, you also get a t-shirt and a sticker when you sign up to One Pass if those are things that you enjoy. I do. So I'm a great proponent of swag. It's always a fun thing, at least for me. So if you enjoy swag, you also get that as part of One Pass. So before we get any further, though, Uber, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm really good, especially like we said earlier, like we're so close to football. I know today we're probably going to talk about a lot of things that we're thinking, we're believing about the Bills, but come next week's show, we're going to have legitimate things to talk about from the past week that actually matter. That's exciting. I'm ready for football season to be back, especially with everything else. I don't care about anything else right now. There's too much nonsense going on. I'm just going to start focusing just only on football and nothing else in the world.
I 100% get that. I really do. Because there's just so much that's going on. And I think unlike sort of what last year was like, where they really brought back a lot of old pieces, there's been a lot of changes to this Bills team. The coaching staff, on the roster itself, a lot of changes. And some of them, I think, for the better. And we will certainly get into that. I'm good for all pregame fanfare. I mean, or whatever you want to call this. I say we just jump into it. Yeah. So I'm going to have you lead off. Is there something you want to talk about right off the top?
Yeah, I actually, and this is a little bit of an intangible thing, but I love the vibes around the team this year. Ooh. And last year, I hated the vibes around the team.
Ooh,
the whole
go off.
Stephon Diggs thing, whether or not there was actually serious turmoil with him and Josh Allen and maybe some other players. I don't know if we'll ever know the extent of it. Clearly, there was something going on because otherwise Stephon Diggs is probably still on the Bills this year. He is not. But all that's besides the point right now. This Bills team seems all dialed in, all having a good time, all playing with each other, like going out and throwing passes this offseason, working out. There's something different about this team, and I don't know if talent-wise I'm as excited because Stephon Diggs is this elite playmaker, and the Bills now no longer have that elite playmaker. But something's to be said for having these good vibes, and the Bills just simply have great vibes around them right now.
Yeah, it's a genuinely fair point. I mean, there was a lot of kind of messiness, and even if it wasn't necessarily a big deal and kind of really only focused around one or two players, sometimes that's enough to just kind of make you feel like I don't love how this is going right now, which is fair. But like you said, this year it is different. And part of that is absolutely not having Stephon Diggs around. Of course, that comes with the fact that you don't have Stephon Diggs on this roster and all the stuff that he brings. And I understand that people could say, well, he's fallen off, he's not the same. Sure, to a point, he's still very, very good, and that should not be overlooked or like over exaggerated. That he, he's genuinely still a very good, talented, strong player. But there's some really exciting pieces that have been added to this roster. I mean, between Curtis Samuel, who I think will have a really good year, you've got. I mean, even just the shifting on the offensive line is just very intriguing to me, and I'm very curious to see how that's all going to shake out. To the safety battle, right? I mean, Cole Bishop is somebody that, like, maybe he doesn't start right away, but his future on this team is something that I am, like, very, very excited about, because I think he is a great fit for this defense. The cornerback battle, like there's a lot of different things that are happening. And even though there's a lot of competition and it's kind of some uncertainty in certain spots, I do think that this is still a very talented roster. And like you said, the vibes are just like generally better. And I think that that's a good thing. Vibes are always a good thing. You don't want bad vibes. You don't want to come into a season and be like, I don't really know what to do with this. Like, we're good enough to make the playoffs, but like, are we going to make the playoffs? Like, I mean, you saw last year with the Philadelphia Eagles, right? I mean, that 10-1, they started off 10-1, right? And then down the stretch, they were 1-6, and the vibes were off. The vibes were off when they were winning. The vibes were off when they were like the far and away most winning team in the NFL, and it ended up biting them by the end of the season, where they just like limped into the playoffs and died in Tampa against the friggin' Bucks. Like it just. Vibes are important, as even though we can't always quantify them in a way that's nice and visible. It's still important to be able to feel good about what your team is like. Let's like,
and I think
go on.
You can also you can go back to last year's teams that were successful. And I think for all of them, and I'm going to keep using the word vibes, which I've been using all off season, but basically for all of them that it succeeded for the most part the entire season, there was good vibes. The Bills were maybe the biggest outlier of the bunch, Bills and Eagles, because there were weird things happening there. But for the most part, as soon as the season got started, the Bills kind of flew under the radar from that standpoint. There wasn't really any bad blood between Stephon Diggs and the team throughout the season. After the season, of course, it boiled over. But you look at the Chiefs, they start the season without Chris Jones. There's all this turmoil there, like, oh my God, you're not going to have their best player. They lose to the Lions. And then Chris Jones comes back, and though they struggled for most of the year, there never seemed to be this kind of crazy explosion there. Same with the 49ers, same with the Lions, same with the Texans, same with the Packers. Like all of these teams you look at and you go back to and you're like, there was a lot of really good energy around them, and there's teams where there wasn't a lot of good energy, and those teams tended to struggle a little bit more. So I know it's an intangible thing. I know it's not something we can quantify, but I do think that that's one of the reasons going into this training camp. I'm just excited because I would expect people that go to training camp this year see a really loose team that's just having a good time. And I think that's kind of what this team needed after the past 4 years.
I think that's true. I think that's fair. Joe DeRosa, host of Under Review, says in his Halo Arbiter voice, greetings, to which I say, were it so easy. He also says, drop a like for these chats. Thank you. Likes do help. As silly and as dumb as it is, and even though you get bombarded with that by pretty much every channel you ever visit on YouTube, likes do help. There's a reason everyone says it. It does help with things like the algorithm and just gaining more visibility to a more mainstream audience. And hopefully more people can come over and see what Cover One is doing. Subscribe as well while you're here. All very helpful things. As Julian agrees with you, breath of fresh air this season. Sweet Spike also says running back room and front seven are better. I think there's a reasonable. I mean, running back room, I definitely agree. Yeah, front seven, there's reason to be optimistic about that. Yeah. Let's see. John Robert also says Josh Allen is more vocal than he has ever been, and Josh has also said he is excited. You know, it's always good when Josh is excited, to a point.
That actually leads me to a question. Yeah. Actually, for you, David. Josh Allen this year, I have this one theory. I don't think the Bills themselves have a ton of pressure on them as a team because they seem to be the trendy pick to kind of stumble this season and maybe not make the playoffs. Like every single time I hear somebody say, who's the team that you think's good, but they're just not going to be good enough this year, it's almost always the Bills. I don't think the Bills have a ton of pressure on them. I think Josh Allen has a ton of pressure on him. How do you feel about that? Do you think that's where the line is kind of on the pressure scale, let's say?
I feel like that's almost like an underlying thing. I don't know how many people are necessarily saying like Josh Allen needs to prove something. That being said, if we get to a point, especially early on in the season, and the offense is not producing the way people are expecting it to, there's going to be inevitably headlines, storylines, etc. that are like, well, this is what happens when you get rid of Stephon Diggs. And to that point, we also have J-Dub here who says if Diggs were on our roster, he'd be wide receiver 1 by a lot because nobody else is even close. I'll never understand paying him $30 million to play for someone else. So, great points, right? If Diggs were on this team, he would be wide receiver 1 by a lot. That's not debatable at all, right? Like, even if you still drafted Keon Coleman, like, you gotta throw it out there and say, like, Stephon Diggs is wide receiver 1 by a lot. I'll never understand paying him $30 million to play for someone else. It's certainly not the ideal scenario. I don't think Brandon Beane was sitting there saying, it sucks, but we gotta do this. But the problem with this is that the relationship between Diggs and the Bills got to a point where this seemed like the best possible solution for both parties. And that sucks, but it's not like the Bills are paying him because they cut him, right? Mm-hmm. This is not a case of a cap casualty and just sort of swallowing your money for this year. This is more a case of this is still a valuable commodity in Stephon Diggs. We can get something out of this. And they were able to get something out of this. And that's a good part of doing this, right? Even if it's not an ideal scenario. And it's not an ideal scenario. You don't want to be trading away one of your best offensive weapons. It doesn't, that's not what you want to do. You don't want to be in that situation. But if you feel like he's becoming more of an issue off the field in particular than what he's doing on the field, and you feel like you can replace him in a meaningful way, perhaps in the aggregate, as one particular writer may or may not have said in his premiere article for Sports Illustrated. Go check that out. If even with all that, you have to be able to just take your lumps and say, this is the decision I've got to make. It's just how it is. It sucks, but you got to be able to make tough decisions. And that's why people like Brandon Beane are in that situation, in that scenario, and not me. Because I don't know if I'd be able to make that trade if I was in that position.
Yeah, and I think in a vacuum, if you look at it and you say, what would the Bills prefer to have? Stephon Diggs and $31 million, or let's say Stephon Diggs or a second-round pick. Let's say they had that choice in a vacuum. What would they want? They'd want Stephon Diggs. But the fact that they traded him and they took a $31 million cap hit this year in exchange for a second-round pick, I think that tells you all you need to know, that there was something here that was so broken between him and the team that Brandon Beane said, this is untenable, like we need to move on. So while it hurts to take a massive cap hit like that for a player of that caliber and not have him on your team, it's also there's something to be said for the Bills had to do it. I don't really know how else to kind of talk about it. It sucks, but I think the Bills made the best out of a bad situation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. It sucks. I would have rather kept Stephon Diggs, obviously, just like anyone else. I don't know. It's a tough situation, and you got to be able to move on and figure out the best way forward. And I think for the most part, the Bills were able to do that. Let's see here. Joe DeRosa says, it's a weird dichotomy of Josh having a lot of pressure, but also having the least amount of pressure that he's had since 2019. I don't know. I don't know how true that is. I feel like there was some pressure. I mean, obviously coming into 2020, right? Because the logic for a lot of people to that point was like, once you get into your second year as a quarterback, that's kind of just sort of who you are, right? As a player. If there weren't a lot of quarterbacks that actually made a third year jump, historically speaking. So people were going into 2020 saying, like, if Josh Allen is who he was in 2019, it's fine. But, like, your defense still has to play at, like, an elite level in order to kind of compensate for that. Well, then Josh Allen took a big leap in 2020. And then after that, it was like, okay, can he sustain that? And then in 2021, more or less did, right? And that 2021 season had its ups and downs offensively in particular, but especially once they got into the playoffs, that I think really cemented in people's minds that Josh Allen is one of those types of guys. 2022 and 2023, I think, just further continue to confirm that sort of feeling for people. So I don't know. I guess this is having a lot of pressure. I don't know if I would say this is the least amount of pressure that he's had since 2019. I would say that, like, 2022 and 2023, maybe you could say in 2022 it was sort of proving that he could do this without Dable, but, like, I think at the end of the day, people were willing to say Josh Allen is Josh Allen, and that's worth a lot, regardless of who your coach was. And that was proven quite obvious with the Ken Dorsey tenure here. Yeah. It's tough.
I do think that it's going to be weird. I think Allen's going to be held to a very unique standard this season, to a point where, like, I'm just throwing two numbers out there that have meaning. I'll get to that in a second. Say he has 4,300 total yards and 29 touchdowns. I think you're going to have a lot of people say, oh my God, he's terrible without Stephon Diggs. What the hell did the Bills do? 4,300 yards and 29 touchdowns? That's not good enough, except it was good enough to get 49 first-place votes for MVP this past year. So I think when we think about Josh Allen and we think about the stats that he could put up this year, I don't think he needs to have that 40-touchdown season and 5,000 yards that everyone is basically demanding of him. As long as he does enough to get the Bills into the playoffs and maybe win a game or two or three, I think people will forget about all the nonsense they're saying about Josh Allen. That's where he's going to be kind of defined at the end of the season. Did he lead this team to the playoffs? Did they win a game? I think the problem is, even if they win one game and then they lose the following one, we're going to be dealing with the same exact shit we dealt with this offseason, next offseason. So I think there's a unique set of pressure on him. And I personally think it's maybe the most, I don't even know, maybe the most ever. I don't know. I guess we're going to see.
Yeah, it'll be that's going to be probably the biggest storyline, the most obvious storyline is just what does this offense look like now without Stephon Diggs and with Joe Brady now fully in control at the helm as offensive coordinator, as opposed to where he was in the middle of last season taking over for Ken Dorsey, because you can't really change an offense in the middle of the season. You kind of have the playbook. You just have to go with what you're given from that playbook. And there were things that he did, a certain shift in philosophy and running the football more and being more consistent about running the football, which was one of the most frustrating parts of the Ken Dorsey era, was that they were better running the football under Ken Dorsey than they were under Brian Daboll. The problem was Ken Dorsey just didn't commit to running the football. There were times where it's like, this is working really well, and then he would be like, let's throw now. It's just like anyway, we've discussed Ken Dorsey ad nauseum on this show, and I'm sure everyone else is kind of over talking about Ken Dorsey at this point. So Keon's Jacket Jockey says, the team said Josh is bigger than Diggs. Josh got what he wanted. Sure. That kind of makes it seem like they were choosing between Josh and Diggs, and I don't think that was ever a scenario that came to light or was ever considered. So I understand what's being said here. Yeah. Let's see. Rick Amerty, hey Mafia, go Bills. Go Bills. That is also a sweet ass beard you are rocking, my man. That is awesome. Wow. That is commitment. Sweet Spike also says, with Josh in a Beats by Dre commercial and Dion wearing strange dress at a Hollywood event, Bills going 20-0. Wins, losses. I don't know about that, but I like the vibes. Yeah. Right? If we're gonna talk about vibes, I like those sorts of vibes. RJ Melville says, before we traded Diggs, I wanted a true wide receiver one. After we traded Diggs, I still want a wide receiver one. Hopefully next draft we could trade up for a wide receiver one, like Julio Jones situation in 2011. I don't know that that's necessarily what's going to happen. And yeah, I don't know what next year's draft looks like. This year's draft obviously had a plethora of wide receivers that were available and were talented and were very, very good. Hence why the Bills ended up taking Keon Coleman after trading back into the second round. You know, there was really only one guy that I thought was worth trading up for, that the Bills could have like reasonably traded up for, or been in a position to trade up for. It was whoever was going to fall to that second Chicago Bears pick, right?
Yeah.
Neighbors or Odunze. And honestly, even if the roles had been switched and had Neighbors fallen and not Odunze, I probably would be like, I don't know if I'm trading up for Neighbors. I really liked Odunze a lot. Kind of significantly more than Neighbors. I liked Neighbors a lot as well. But that's neither here nor there, right? The fact that they didn't make that trade just sort of said, okay, that's not what they wanted to do. If Chicago was even willing to move off of that pick, which we're not totally sure they were, because the idea of having Rome Odunze with DJ Moore and Keenan Allen is pretty nice for a rookie quarterback to have.
Yeah.
And considering that and whatever that may have cost, it was just clearly that was never going to happen. So then you're left with, okay, if you're not going to get one of those clear bona fide wide receiver one types, who are you left with? You're left with kind of role players. And I know people were interested in Brian Thomas Jr. I also liked Brian Thomas Jr., but he was, I don't see him as somebody that's going to eventually become a wide receiver one necessarily. Probably like a high value wide receiver two. And that's a good thing, but I also think you could say the same about a Keon Coleman. And I think even with someone like Keon Coleman, you could say, there's room for wide receiver one. I don't know if he's necessarily going to reach that particular point. I don't know if he'll ever get to that point in his development in his career, because I think that would be very difficult to do. But I do think there's tons of potential with Keon Coleman, and I kind of agree with RJ in the point that I think what they have now is not what they think should be settled for the future, right?
Yeah.
In terms of the wide receiver room.
I agree with that too, and I wouldn't be stunned if they draft a receiver in next year's draft early, first, second, third round, maybe the first round. But I do think that they have a solid stable right now and guys that they're going to have on the roster next year. Keon Coleman will be here next year. Curtis Samuel will be here next year. Khalil Shakir will be here next year. So will Dalton Kincaid and Dawson Knox. And I like those 5 receiving style players, and I like the sets you can do with them. I think the Bills are trying to do to some extent what the Chiefs have done with Patrick Mahomes. Said, we know that you're an elite playmaker. We know what you're capable of doing. We know that you don't need an insane amount of talent around you to succeed. So if we get rid of, say, a Stephon Diggs that costs $30 million a year, and we try to pay some lower level players and try to win with the aggregate, we trust that you can lead this offense, and then we can invest our money elsewhere. So I think that's what you could see the Bills doing next year. But as for this year, yeah, we don't have the wide receiver one like a Stephon Diggs, but I do like and am intrigued by the combos they have. And Curtis Samuel is a very uniquely talented player that fits in this offense in a really, really, really fun way. And he's just flying under the national radar completely. Where the Bills line him up every single play, like he could be a running back, he can be a slot receiver, he can be on the outside, he can be anywhere. They can put him in motion, a la Tyreek Hill, and they can just kind of play around with all these different things they can do with Curtis Samuel. He is what they wanted Isaiah McKenzie to be, except way, way better than what Isaiah McKenzie was. So I think you're going to see a different offense this year. Is it going to be better without Stephon Diggs? I'm not going to go that far, but it could be different in a better way, if that makes sense.
No, I kind of agree with that, right? Yeah. Like, because with Brady, being who he is and wanting to run the football more, right? Like, that in itself takes more pressure off of Josh Allen.
True.
And spreading the ball around kind of forces him to... I feel like under Ken Dorsey, he really tried to make Josh Allen go through certain reads and do things in a more traditional way as a quarterback. First of all, I don't think that's how you should treat Josh Allen. I don't think that's how you should coach Josh Allen. I understand the thought of the thought process of, like, if he can do this, if he can actually unlock this sort of part of his development, then he basically is, like, at the same level as Patrick Mahomes at that point. I understand that thought process, but after a certain point, you kind of just have to say, like, yeah, but it's not working. And even arguably more important than that, it's not working. And part of the reason why it's not working is the play designs and the play calls that you're putting in here are not working because they've become predictable, because it's the same sort of concepts week in and week out, just, you know, slightly presented differently, and even not that much differently. It wasn't a case of presenting it differently by adding emotion or doing some different combination of things with the routes themselves. It was more about, like, changing the personnel and maybe the grouping and how it just didn't work. It just didn't make sense. And he kept doing it over and over and over again, and there was no real development or changes. Really, more than that, that's why he was canned in the middle of the season. And with Joe Brady, it seems like he has a better sense of what's going to work and what's not going to work, and how to adjust that in the middle of the game. Which is hard. That's not an easy thing to do. But Brady seems to just have better instincts on what to do in those particular scenarios and in those particular circumstances. So I feel pretty confident with Brady making this offense, like you said, different and better in a different way.
Yeah.
It's not going to be better because he took what Ken Dorsey was trying to do and just did it better. It's more because Joe Brady and what he wants to do is going to be, in all likelihood, a bit more well executed than what Ken Dorsey was trying to do when he was here. I think that's enough. Josh Allen, offensive coordinator talk, wide receiver talk. So let's talk about the defense. I kind of want to talk about the secondary a lot, actually, because there's a couple different positions up for grabs here, in my mind. And let's start with cornerback, because this is an area that obviously has a lot of debate around it. On one side of the field, presumably, you've got Russell Douglas, who they traded for in the middle of last season, and was gangbusters for them, right? I mean, he was kind of just a godsend for them in the middle of the season. You want to talk about a midseason trade working out for your team. That worked out for the Bills in a big way. They needed him to be something right away, and he was someone right away for them. So that was a big win, and I think that he still fits well within this defense. On the other side, you have two guys drafted in the same year, and the guy that is the presumed starter was the guy who's been the presumed starter kind of since they came together. Or I should say, became the starter. He was not the presumed starter, because Christian Benford ended up starting across from Dane Jackson in week 1 in 2022. And I think people were expecting Kyer Elam. And I don't know if that's going to change all that much. Christian Benford last year really flew under the radar and played a lot of really good football for this team. And Kyer Elam, I think, obviously has plenty of potential, plenty of talent, and plenty of ability. And I think a change in some of the coaching staff on the defensive side of the ball will potentially bring some different aspects out of him, will help kind of clear his mind a bit, will help give him more opportunities, maybe a shift more towards man coverage, which is what he was really good at when he was at the University of Florida. Maybe that helps him. But I also think, at the end of the day, that Kaiir Elam is kind of who he is. And who he is somebody that's going to take chances, and it's going to be grabby, and is going to create problems for himself. But those problems could be outweighed by the good plays that he makes. In a way, it's almost like Josh Allen at cornerback, which, I'm not saying that's exactly who Kaiir Elam is, because if he were that good at that, he would be playing right now, and we wouldn't be wondering about that. I do think, though, that the Bills need to give him a real chance to show what he's got. And it may be a case of maybe we see more of Kaiir Elam in the preseason than we originally anticipated. Either because they want to see him play and give him opportunities to prove himself for this team, or kind of what they did with Sammy Watkins in 2017, where they had him for that first preseason game. They threw to him like 6 times in one drive, and everyone was like, Sammy Watkins is going to be utilized in this offense. It's going to be great. And then before the next preseason game even came around, he had been traded to the Rams. And it may be a case where they're shopping around Kaiir Elam and saying, hey, there's probably some teams that are looking at him and saying, we had a pretty good grade on him. We think we can get something out of him. Maybe we should see if we can send it over. What do you think would be a reasonable trade for Kaiir Elam? Like a 4th?
I mean, I don't think there's any chance to get a 4th round pick for him.
I don't think so either.
I mean, what would I trade him for? I'd probably need I think a 5th. I might do it. 6th, 7th. I'm not gonna waste that. Like, I'm not gonna get rid of him, lower the depth at corner for a 6th or 7th round pick.
Right.
A 5th is still a little bit on the fence. A 4th right away. If the Bills got offered a 4th today for Kaiir Elam, I'm also confident they'd take it. But I mean, 4th, 5th, like, that's the territory he's in. I think there are some Bills fans that probably think, we could trade Kaiir Elam for a 2nd. There's no way in hell you're trading.
No, absolutely not.
He's just. So to your point, like, they have to give him an opportunity to show what he can do, but there is just so few paths for his opportunity outside of injury to me. So to your point, again, like, that makes sense in the preseason, like, play him all the time. I don't know how he can possibly do something in training camp and preseason where the Bills suddenly say, like, oh, yep, that guy that's beaten you out the past 2 years, Christian Benford, you've shined in practice and you shined in these made-up games that are all vanilla offense. That's good enough for you to jump him in the depth chart. It would be stunning to me if that happened. It's not impossible, but I think that Christian Benford has earned the right to be the presumptive starter, and I think he will start week 1. Kaiir Elam, he's just – I also don't think he fits Sean McDermott very well in that aggressive nature at corner, that aggressive nature in the secondary. To an extent, McDermott doesn't love that because he doesn't like getting beat deep, and the Bills consistently finish amongst the best in the league in a low amount of big plays because of that. That's why he likes Christian Benford, because he can do those things. He can keep the guys in front of him, not allow big plays. Elam's going to give up a big play or two a game. He might get a pick. He's Trayvon Diggs. He's that style player where it's, I'm going to go try to get the ball, and if I get beat for an 80-yard touchdown, I get beat for an 80-yard touchdown. And that's terrifying. That's absolutely terrifying.
Yeah. And it's unfortunate because they clearly in that draft wanted to get someone that wasn't Kaiir Elam, right? Like, they wanted Trent McDuffie. That seems to be who they wanted. They didn't get him. But this is who you got. And like you said, you got to be given a real good offer in order to essentially make your cornerback depth worse.
Yeah.
And especially because he doesn't cost a lot. you don't need to like ship him off for nothing. That just doesn't make sense to do that. But you might get an offer where you say, maybe this is worth it, and maybe we can find somebody else throughout this preseason process that we kind of like, and maybe we can make that work. So we'll see.
I think if we get news that breaks at any point over the next month or so that the Bills have signed a veteran corner, and not just a veteran corner like a Josh Norman who basically doesn't play football anymore, he just coaches, but a veteran corner where you're like, oh yeah, that dude could play. If that happens, I'm gonna expect it to coincide with an Elam trade to some extent. So I think if I see that signing, it's going to trigger my idea of like, where is Elam going? Just because they need somebody. They can't, with what they have right now, they can't trade Kyrie Elam. They just don't have enough depth at corner where you can't be comfortable with anybody. Like Jamarcus Ingram, I like, but I'm not comfortable with him if he has to start for an extended period of time. And then after Jamarcus Ingram, like, who the hell are you going to lean on? Kenny H. Lovely? I'm not leaning on Kenny H. Lovely. So I think they would either need to be wowed or a veteran corner is added to this roster that the Bills can trust to back up Rasul and Christian Benford.
I think that's pretty much on point. Let's talk about safety.
Yeah.
Let's talk about safety because there's some really good players at safety right now for this team. Some really interesting players. On the one hand, you have Taylor Rapp, right, who was on this team and played a decent amount of snaps last year and maybe didn't do a ton in those scenarios, but he also got the game-winning interception of Tua to bring the division back to the Bills. So there's something there. Some good vibes if we want to continue talking about vibes with Taylor Rapp, at least for me. I think that Taylor Rapp wasn't necessarily given a ton of opportunities. Obviously, you have Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde for most of the year. So, you're not necessarily replacing either of those guys. But I also think that, people are kind of overlooking what Taylor Rapp can do in this defense. And I think that he can be a really good player in year 2 with this defense. And I think with Bobby Babich being the defensive coordinator and providing an extra set of eyes and brain, essentially, for Sean McDermott to work with in terms of the defense, I think that this will be a really good year for Taylor Rapp.
Yeah. And
I'm interested in seeing what that'll look like. The other thing that's really interesting is who is going to start opposite of Taylor Rapp, because I don't know if this is necessarily news to anyone, but like Taylor Rapp is starting. This is not a question. Mm-hmm. This is, look at the contract that they gave him in the offseason. He's starting for this football team. So who is starting opposite of Taylor Rapp? Because they also signed Mike Edwards, who I think also fits really well in this defense. And it's funny because he was drafted by the Bucs when Todd Bowles was the defense coordinator and is now the head coach there. Todd Bowles, great defensive coordinator, really great with defensive backs. Goes to the Chiefs for a season. Steve Spagnuolo, great defensive coordinator, great with defensive backs. Now with the Bills, with Sean McDermott, great defensive coordinator, really good with defensive backs. These coaches who really seem to shine with really good defensive back play and really seem to know how to evaluate it, really like Mike Edwards, apparently. And there's reason why. He's very fast, he's very athletic, he's very aggressive, and that's shown in his time in the NFL so far. And I think that with the Bills, you could potentially see him starting from week 1. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying this is necessarily going to be a Ramon Humber situation. Ramon Humber / Matt Milano situation.
Oh, God.
Because I think Mike Edwards is just way better than what Ramon Humber was in that year. Yeah. But I do think there will be some impatience among Bills fans of wanting to see Cole Bishop start right away. And he might get some sprinkling in here and there, and he might make a really good play or a nice hit or something. And people will say, you gotta play this guy, you gotta start this guy. Oh, but McDermott doesn't do that. He doesn't start rookies. So, first of all, as we both know, and as we've said on this podcast and delivered with strong evidence, Sean McDermott starts rookies. Yeah. And that's a dumb narrative that started really because of the Matt Milano, Ramon Humber situation in the first place. But I think back then, you could also say, like, there's not, like, it's not crazy to not start a rookie 5th round pick at linebacker. I understand he was flashy and exciting, but, like, he's still a rookie 5th round pick. It's okay to be cautious about that. Regardless of that, guys like Tremaine Edwards, also, by the way, in that same year, 2017, Trey White started all 17 games. Just saying. Yeah. 16 games back then. 2018, you have Josh Allen, obviously, who they should have sat, and they were clearly planning to before realizing, oh my god, Nate Peterman is awful. Not like we can kind of live with bad, like, no, just flat out hopeless and awful. So they had to start Josh Allen because he was legitimately their best option at that point. But Tremaine Edmonds had to start. I mean, did he have to start right away? Probably, but also they trusted him to start right away, regardless of that. And being the middle linebacker in this defense and having the responsibilities that he had, it's a pretty big deal for somebody who had, like, just turned 20 years old and could not legally drink. So they clearly trusted him to do that. You have other guys like Ed Oliver, and I know people are like, oh, but Ed Oliver got, like, benched one game or something like that. And he's, he got rotated in a bunch. Like, every single NFL team, this is another thing we need to, like, debunk right now. Every single NFL team rotates their defensive line. All of them. It is, like, it's a big deal that Max Crosby plays as many snaps as he does, because he's basically the only defensive lineman that does. He's one of those completely unique players where he plays 90+% of the snaps for the Raiders. Most teams, basically every other NFL team, does not do that and can't do that. The Bills are in a position where they have plenty of depth on defensive line. Maybe not the elite high-level talent that we want from the starting group necessarily, but there's plenty of depth on this defensive line. Where rotating these guys is a good thing, and it's not a bad thing. And so when you look, you might be able to say, hey, maybe some guys are being rotated in and out in certain situations where they shouldn't be. Maybe. There might be a couple of third downs that happen where you'd like to have Ed Oliver on the field, and he's not on the field. So be it. I'm not going to argue with that. Regardless, though, the idea that rotating your defensive linemen is something that, like, the Bills do to their detriment is ridiculous. It's nonsensical, because then you're talking about the rest of the NFL making that exact same stupid decision. And NFL teams are certainly capable of making their own dumb, wrong decisions. This just isn't one of them.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to look this up just to see the number. Myles Garrett, who might be the best defensive player in the world, plays 81% of the snaps, which is a very, very high number. Ed Oliver played 72% last year. So yeah, you're right in that, relative range of the elite players. So yeah, other teams rotate their players too. But just going back to the safeties for a second too, because I also just pulled up a couple stats here just because I was generally interested in this. Like Jordan Poyer, if you comp him to, Taylor Rapp, if you comp him to Jordan Poyer last year, it's not that wild to say that Taylor Rapp played better football than Jordan Poyer last year. So Taylor Rapp played about half the snaps that Jordan Poyer did, a little less than half, and had half the tackles. Taylor Rapp also had a lower passer rating against. Granted, they played different positions basically the entire year, but Jordan Poyer kind of took a step back last year, and Taylor Rapp is still very young. I don't think it's crazy to say that Taylor Rapp this year might be better than Jordan Poyer was last year. And I think that the Bills probably are leaning into this idea. If they have three safeties and Mike Edwards, Jordan Poyer, and Cole Bishop, that they think the three of them combined can be the equivalent at a minimum to what Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer were giving them last year. I'm actually leaning on the side of, I think that the safeties are going to be better this year than they were last year. And thus, I think the defense as a whole is going to be better this year than it was last year. I think that Rasul Douglas and Christian Benford are the best corner duo the Bills have had in the Sean McDermott era. I think a healthy Matt Milano and Terrell Bernard, it will be insane. I think the Bills defensive line, although there are some weird intricacies there at defensive end, I think they can be really good. I think that this defense can be really, really freaking good this year. And I think a lot of outsiders looking in are looking at, oh, man, they lost Jordan Poyer and they lost Trey White and they lost Leonard Floyd and they lost Micah Hyde. And outside of Leonard Floyd, the three of the other guys leaving, I'm like, I hate it because I love them. But from a football perspective, the Bills might be better without them. And that's sad, but it might be true.
Yeah. It's a really good point, right? And actually, I'm gonna bring up a comment here from RJ. I see a Ramon Humber situation where Cole starts out peppered in, and then he will start by the end of the year at that strong safety spot, and Rapp will transition to that 2023 Poyer role. This is another great point about the safeties, right? Yeah. Is that the whole point, or one of the biggest points of a Sean McDermott defense that we've seen since he's gotten here, whether it's been led by McDermott or by Leslie Frazier. The interchangeability of the safeties is important. Like, we kind of get stuck in these roles of, like, strong safety plays in the box, free safety plays deep, etc., and it needs to be a center fielder and all that sort of stuff. At the end of the day, for this Bills defense, these guys need to be able to change into those two different spots as much as they possibly can. And I think Rapp can definitely play deep, and I think he can definitely play up near the line of scrimmage. I feel the same sort of way about Cole Bishop, and I kind of sort of feel the same way about Mike Edwards. And I know we've talked about this before, and I doubt that this will be any different in this season. The idea of having a three safety look is really intriguing to me. Whether or not we see that, I doubt it, right? I doubt that'll be like a staple of this defense just because of the way the NFL is, and also because they still have Taron Johnson, who was a second-team All-Pro nickel corner last year, to Trent McDuffie, who had an unbelievable season for the Chiefs last year. I really think that the Bills have the safeties that they need to make this defense work the way they want it to. And in some ways, like you said, could be better. In a pretty major way, too.
Yeah, and you brought up Taron Johnson. I think, like, the Bills have this sneaky interchangeability that outside of Bills content creators and Bills fans, I don't think a lot of the rest of the NFL is paying much attention to. But you look at Taron Johnson, Matt Milano, Terrell Bernard, Mike Edwards, Taylor Rapp, Cole Bishop. You can move these guys all over the field and have tricky looks where you can put them in all the same different positions. You could literally drop Terrell Bernard back to safety at points, and you can move Cole Bishop up to linebacker after the snap. You can just mess with quarterbacks' heads because that group of guys is so interchangeable. Not to mention Rasul Douglas is pretty damn good at tackling as well, as is Christian Benford. Like, the Bills' back seven is kind of sneaky, like, unique in the NFL, and I think Sean McDermott and Bobby Babbitt are about to have a field day with changing around players that are young, talented, and willing to lay you out if they have to.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, and this is actually another good point that I'm going to bring up by one of our commentators. Mike Malin-Qatar says, on one hand, we have small linebackers, but on the other hand, we have physical safeties. It's a pretty physical secondary as a whole. And yes, Terrell Bernard and Matt Milano are smaller linebackers, but they still win at the line of scrimmage in a way that is sustainable, right? Like, I've kind of talked about this before, where we kind of get this notion, particularly with linebacker play, that there is a specific way that certain linebackers have to win, and that it's, you gotta stack and shed these offensive linemen when they climb to the second level. And I think a lot of coaches would probably agree with that. That's like a good thing that you can do, and that's something worth learning if you can do that. Terrell Bernard is not somebody I'm going to coach up to be like, hey, you need to learn how to stack and shed. Like, that's like, no. Because one of the things he can do is figure out a way around tackles without taking them on directly and still being gap sound from a defensive schematic standpoint. Like, he is going to be where he needs to be and do what he needs to do, but he's not going to take on a block in a traditional way. He's going to find a way around there while still being in the position that he needs to be in. And Matt Milano is already in a position because of just where he's playing on the defense, right? Like, he's not going to take on a ton of blockers. He's not going to take on as many hits necessarily, even though he can, not because he's big, but because he's just so freaking physical. And but like this is another thing that I think is sort of a misnomer of this defense, is that it's like a finesse defense of sorts, and I think some people are kind of living with scars from like the Saints game from 2017 where they ran for like 400 rushing yards or whatever it was, or the Colts game from 2021 where Jonathan Taylor had 6 touchdowns.
Something stupid.
Something stupid.
I hated that game.
Like 4 touchdowns at least. And I think that if there's a way to attack this Bills defense, I think that that's certainly a way if you have the offensive line and the running back to do that. Yeah. Not every team has that. So if not every team can attack you in that way, and even if they can, it's not like they're incapable of taking on those sorts of teams either. Yeah. Like, they could do what they need to do against good rushing teams. It's just not going to be like a total stopgap, like we're going to limit them to, 30 yards or something ridiculous like that. You got to just sort of live with what you can. You're never going to be perfect defensively throughout an entire season, even if some of the best defenses kind of feel like they are, right? Like you kind of just sort of see them throughout the season, and you only really see highlights or little reels of them, and you're like, oh man, what do you do against that? And it's like, well, you can do something, because you only need to win that one game. And especially when you get into the playoffs, it's sort of like, sometimes those sorts of defenses get exposed because there's just one team that can exploit one thing and do it consistently enough and just hammer it and hammer it and hammer it throughout one game, because that's all that matters. It's just that one game once you get in the playoffs. Yeah. But now I'm off on a total tangent, and I'm gonna have you rescue me.
I think that concept that there is a belief that the Bills are a finesse team in general, it stems from, like you said, the size of the linebackers. Like, we had these 2 little linebackers. How could the Bills actually be like a punch you in the mouth team? And yet they somehow still are, because Terrell Bernard and Matt Milano play at the line of scrimmage. The thing that really, really, really excites me going into this season about that part of the Bills defense is we saw last year, after Matt Milano and Daquan Jones, the Bills' nose tackle, go down in the same game early in the season, the Bills still find a way to succeed on defense. It did take them some time because they had to figure out how to deal with the loss of 3 of their best defenders, including Trey White in that. But they did, and Terrell Bernard still played well without the protection of a player like Daquan Jones in front of him. And now you come into this year, and Daquan Jones is back. Maybe he isn't the player he was last year. I guess that remains to be seen as well. But the Bills have depth too. Austin Johnson is a great backup guy that can play that nose position as well. And then Dwayne Carter might be a really good backup to Ed Oliver that you could also rotate in behind Daquan Jones if you need to. The Bills have more depth, more talented depth at the interior defensive line with both of their linebackers presumably healthy. Like, we saw them dominate at points. Terrell Bernard dominated points last year without the protection of Matt Milano, without the protection of Daquan Jones, and now he's got both of them back. Like, Terrell Bernard could be in for a special year, and if he's in for a special year, the entire defense is probably in for a special year.
100%. And it's going to be very, very interesting to see how that front 7 works together with the back end. I'm really looking forward to seeing what this Bills defense looks like with Bobby Babich as the defense coordinator and seeing what changes are going to be made.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of implications that we're kind of piecing and putting together here. But we're not going to know the full picture until the season starts. And we'll get a little bit of that in the preseason. We'll get some of that in the preseason. But the Bills are also a team that's definitely going to be like, we're not gonna show our hands for anything. We're gonna hold. Well, we'll just see this, but we got some other stuff too. Yeah, it's gonna be very, 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 very interesting to see exactly how that all goes. Anything else you wanna tackle from like a position group standpoint or anything like competition wise?
I'm generally intrigued at defensive end by one portion of it. Greg Rousseau, AJ Epinesa, Von Miller, like those three guaranteed 100% making this roster. Then I'm wondering who the fourth and fifth guy are going to be. And I expect 5 defensive ends to make the 53-man roster, but I'm wondering who's going to be the game day inactive versus the game day active. And you basically have Dwayne Smoot, you have Casey Tuhill, and then you have Javon Solomon, their draft pick this year. I don't even know what I want. Like, Dwayne Smoot is a very good football player, so seemingly I want him. But Javon Solomon's this unique player, so I want him. And then Casey Tuhill is a solid player, so I kind of want him too. All 3 of those guys aren't making this roster. I can't imagine the Bills are going to carry 6 defensive ends. I think that room's intriguing. We need Groot to hit his upside and AJ Epinesa to hit his upside, because right now they don't have a true edge rusher that I'm super, super confident is going to constantly get to the quarterback, though I hope Von Miller somehow can return to 60% of what he was in 2022. Like, that would be fine. 60% of Von Miller in 2022, I'd be okay with that.
Yeah. Yeah, just having Von Miller make any sort of impact would be nice, instead of just going out there and being blocked. God, that was depressing every week. Yeah. Every single week, that's what would happen. You want to talk about punters? I mean, I know you want to talk about punters. I know you always want to talk about punters. Do you want to talk about punters?
No, I mean, I love special teams. I can talk about punters all day, but I just, Jack Browning's going to be the Bills punter, so people should just get used to his name, and Sam Martin will be cut. And hopefully, I think it was Mike Malley Guitar said, I hope Tyler Bass rebounds. Yeah. I mean, he has to. I've talked Tyler Bass up, I feel like, more than most people on earth. When I did all my write-ups last year, I talked about how good Tyler Bass was because he was so damn good.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I'm now nervous, which my nerves won't be quelled in the regular season. It's going to take the postseason to quell them, which sucks. He's the one player on this Bills team that I look at and I'm like, I literally have no idea what you are. You could be the best kicker in the NFL, or you might not be on the Bills next year.
I am more willing to give Tyler Bass credit that he will rebound, that he will be okay, that he will be able to figure out what to do and how to return to form. Because I really do think he is like an all-pro caliber kicker when he's on. And in those cases, when he is on, like, it's basically automatic, and that's important. And as he says, as Mike Malley says here, having an elite kicker can be the difference between winning and losing. It's totally true, and
those fans know that too well.
Yeah, and I think that when, especially, you're shifting more towards running the football and you're not necessarily kind of by that nature getting as many plays in and kind of not getting as many chances to score, right? Like, you need to be able to score when you have the chance, whether it's a touchdown or a field goal, because there are times where you need to just be able to kick a field goal. And sometimes it's a short field goal, sometimes it's a long field goal. And you just need to be able to handle that. In the past, I'd be able to say, yeah, Tyler Bass can handle any kick. Like, from any distance, from any point on the field, like, Now I'm not quite so sure. But I think it's possible for him to eventually to get back to form, to get back to what he will be doing, or what he's done before, and hopefully that will continue on. So you're very confident that Jack Browning is going to be the Bills punter. You're like not. I don't want to say you're 100% on this, but you seem to be as close to 100% as you possibly can be.
Oh man, I don't know how to say this. I'd be willing to put more money on it that he is the Bills punter week 1 than I would that the Bills win the division.
Ooh.
So,
wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's, I mean, I can't put money. The Jack Browning thing, like, there's no book that's going to let me bet that, so I can't even do that. I have money. The Bills are winning the division, so
of course, yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just say quickly, like, he's versatile. He can kick. He can punt. He's not the best kicker in the world. He's got a booming leg as a punter, though. He's got to learn how to hold. If he can learn how to hold, and maybe, although I've done some research on Sam Martin and ignoring last year, Sam Martin, pretty damn good holder and has held for some pretty good kickers that have talked about him as being a very good holder. Something was wrong last year. I don't know if it was Sam Martin. I don't know if it was Tyler Bass, but maybe Jack Browning is the guy that the Bills need here to do something different. And maybe he's a better holder somehow than Sam Martin is. So yeah, Jack Browning, Bills punter, week
1. I'm with you. Because I'm tired of seeing Sam Martin trot out there. And it would be nice to just kind of not go back into the well of whatever old punter is currently not on someone else's team, right? That's kind of how they ended up with Matt Hawk. It's how they ended up with Sam Martin. Having a nice young punter would be nice. That's all. I'd rather not talk about. I know you are fine with talking about punting. I'd rather not talk about it unless I really have to. So that's what I would like to see at the end of this preseason, is being able to close the book on whoever the punter is and not having to think too much about it. Yeah. Any other just sort of storylines, things you want to talk about with training camp revving up?
I think, like, I might do this tomorrow. I could probably go in and lock in 40 guys that I'm pretty confident are going to make this roster, and then maybe the last 10 or so, I probably get closer to 45. There are some interesting battles. I think the one thing to keep an eye on, and we've talked about it in this show, and I've talked about it also when I've been on Joe DeRosa's show too, is like special teams are going to be paramount this year. And I know that Bills fans hate special teams because I've had the Isaiah Hodgins fight every goddamn year. And if I have to have the Isaiah Hodgins fight one more freaking time, I'm going to lose my goddamn mind. That being said, special teams are even more important this year because of the new kickoff rules. So when somebody gets cut because they don't know how to tackle somebody, a player that would be their Bills wide receiver 7 per se, don't throw a freaking hissy fit. Just understand that somebody like Eddie Ulofoshio probably earned that roster spot because of his special team play over a player like Chase Claypool, who probably isn't going to play special teams for you. So I think if you're looking for a storyline or looking for something to follow heading into training camp, watch special teams, because that'll give you a lot of answers on who's going to make the Bills roster.
I will agree with all that. I'm kind of wondering if we can do this. I'm gonna say we're gonna try. We're gonna try. It's been a while, but we're gonna try to do some true or rubbish.
Rubbish.
Let's go. All right. For those of you who have not been following the show long enough to understand the deep lore that comes with this show, True or Rubbish is a segment where I will give Uber a statement, and he will tell me if he thinks if it is true or if he thinks it is rubbish. And you at home, feel free to play along. Throw in a comment and play along with us and tell us if you think if it is true or rubbish. Okay, so where do I want to start with this? I kind of already started, in a sense, by asking you about the punters. I probably should have saved that for this, but I didn't really think we were going to do this. Okay. So, let's start here. I brought up baseball at the start of this show. And we had noted baseball fan Bruce Nolan on this podcast last month. That's pure sarcasm, by the way. He struggled to name 5 baseball players. You do enjoy baseball, though. Am I correct in this? You do enjoy baseball. Yeah. You are a Yankees fan.
Until Aaron Boone's fired into the actual sun, like I need to see him put in a spaceship and sent on his merry way, I am not a Yankees fan.
But you watch the Yankees.
I can from time to time. Yes.
You want to be a Yankees fan, basically, is what I'm getting from this. Okay.
Yes.
All right. The New York Yankees make the playoffs in 2024.
True. Yeah, but they don't make it.
Man, I wasn't ready for that. I'll be honest.
All after all, can't believe it. It was true.
It's been a rough stretch for them. Lately.
I mean, it's been a rough stretch. Then again, I look at them right now. They have 60 wins. There's only 3 teams in all of the. So even though they've had a rough stretch, they're still relatively high up in the standings. And I don't think that they'll fall to another team kind of can dump them like.
I was gonna let you go, but your mic is so messed up right now. Wait, now it's back.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
You were like so muffled there. I have no idea what happened.
I'm holding the cord now into my mic, so
maybe that's it.
But yeah, I mean, just from a win total standpoint, I don't think that they can miss the playoffs. I hope they do. I literally hope they do.
Because you think that'll be the thing that gets him fired?
No, I don't think anything will ever get him fired, but I want him embarrassed to no end at this point.
That's very fair. That's very fair. Being a Philadelphia sports fan, just in general, I just sort of have this natural disdain for any New York-based sports team. Like, not like Buffalo-based sports teams, because they're actually in New York and they're an actual franchise that I root for. But like New York, like Mets, Yankees, Knicks, Giants, Jets, all of that is just like throw it out. Be done with this. I'm done with this garbage. So I will say I do enjoy seeing the Yankees suffer, especially when they got to like 50 wins and they were looking like super hot, and it would look like, oh, maybe this is the year they turn the corner, and then they went on their really bad stretch of games. All right, moving on away from baseball and here to the thing that we are actually here to talk about, which is football. True or rubbish? The Dolphins finish behind at least 2 teams in the AFC East.
True. It's true.
Ooh, let's go.
All after all, can't believe it. It was true.
Speak your truth, Uber.
So the Bills are going to win the division again. I'm confident in that. Like I said, I put money on that. I'm not as confident as Jack Browning making the Bills as I am about the Bills winning the AFC East, but I'm confident in both of them. I'm also confident, and this sucks, and I don't want it to happen, in the Jets making the playoffs. I want the Jets to go on a 20-year drought of making the playoffs. I would enjoy every second of that. It's not going to happen. They're too good of a football team to miss the playoffs this year, assuming Tyrod Taylor can stay healthy. Even if Aaron Rodgers can't, Tyrod does, they will be fine. The Dolphins, I don't understand where this concept of like, oh, the Dolphins got better this offseason, they're going to be better this year. We know what the Dolphins are, and they lost Christian Wilkins, and you do not replace a Christian Wilkins. Just like the Bills don't replace a Stephon Diggs, the Bills are attempting to do it by aggregate. The Dolphins are not attempting to do it by aggregate. They're attempting to just not do it. And you can't do that with a player of Christian Wilkins' caliber. That defense is going to get eaten alive, and that team is going to struggle more than I think a lot of people are willing to admit.
Yeah, I go back to, defensively, not just that they lost Christian Wilkins, but, again, 3 different defensive coordinators in as many seasons.
Yeah.
And they're all running different things, right? This is not like, oh, well, we had this sort of Fangio-style defense, and now we're doing another Fangio type of guy. And it's like, no, these are all just completely different styles of defense. And that's concerning. It's tough. And when you don't have a central anchor like a Christian Wilkins to kind of lean back on, I don't know what to do with that. And then you have to consider two of their best players are edge guys who had season-ending injuries last year. And not like, oh, they broke their ankle, they couldn't play the last 3 games of the season or something. No. Bradley Chubb tore his ACL in a game that was completely out of hand, and Jalen Phillips blew his Achilles out. Like, these are not easily recoverable injuries. On the one hand, I think Jalen Phillips is like a freak athlete, and I think that there's a chance for him to come back from that. But I don't know when that's going to be. I could have said the same thing about Von Miller last year, and I would have been wrong. And I was wrong, because I said that was going to happen. But I don't know what we're expecting to have happen here. And the Dolphins are looking right now at guys like Emmanuel Ogbah and Yannick Ngakoue, because they need some guys to just start this year that aren't undersized rookies. You know, like, you can have positive feelings about Chop Robinson as a prospect and as a player in the future. It's not somebody I want starting J1 for this defense. That's insane to me. With basically very little help outside of, like, Jalen Ramsey and Javon Holland, who are in the secondary. There's only so much those guys can do to affect what happens up front. I don't know, man. This is tough. This is going to be very tough adjustments for them.
That first Bills-Dolphins game is going to be the Bills-Cowboys game from last year. That's what the Bills are going to do to them. Just give the ball to James Cook and over again, rush for 200, 250 yards, easily walk away with a W there. Like, that team is so built to stop the pass only, but even saying that, they're not. Like, they're not.
Right.
Jalen Ramsey is really good and Javon Holland is really good. And then you're going to start Jordan Poyer. That's fun, but he's also, 33, 34 years old. Kendall Fuller's nice. Cater Co's nice. Like, but they're not. This defense is not good. Like, it's just simply not a good defense, and that's why I don't understand why people are pretending like this team is elite. They're not.
The best scenario that can happen for them is that, like, David Long Jr. and Jordan Brooks are playing at such a high level, particularly when it comes to run defense. And David Long Jr. is a really good run defender, a very good run defender. But I felt better about David Long Jr. in Vic Fangio's defense than I did in Anthony Weaver's defense, which is not that I think that he's a bad fit in Anthony Weaver's defense. It's that I have no idea what Anthony Weaver's defense actually is. Is it a Mike McDonald type of defense? Is it more like a Chuck Pagano sort of thing? Like, Anthony Weaver's been with the Ravens for a while. He's been under various defensive coordinators. Is he going to be more like a Dean Pease type of guy? Is he going to be like a Wink Martindale type of guy? I have no idea. I don't know what to do with this. And if that's the case, like, I don't think Dolphins fans know either. Like, at least most of them, I would think. Yeah. I have very bad feelings about this defense. And I don't know if this is something like last year where, like, eventually, over time, over the course of the season, they'll get better. Maybe that's the case. Maybe that happens. But this is a very strong chance where this defense is just not good enough for this team.
They better start fast. And I don't know how fast they can start. Jags, Bills, Seahawks is their first 3. They got to win at least 2. If they go 1-2, they're screwed. Their last 6 games, Packers, Jets, Texans, 49ers, Browns, Jets. This team is not built to win late in the season. They could very easily have a collapse this year, just like they did last year. That last 6 games, man, they could go 1-5, 0-6, 2-4. Yeah, I think the Dolphins are in for a big letdown this year.
I kind of agree. I just don't know where a lot of the love for the Dolphins. Honestly, some of the love for the Dolphins kind of feels like more love for Mike McDaniel and believing in Mike McDaniel, that he's like essentially like a Sean McVay type of coach. And I don't think he's that level. And I think Mike McDaniel is very good at what he does. But Sean McVay, I think, is just a very special coach. And I don't think that Mike McDaniel is quite that guy.
For sure.
Yeah. Final statement for True or Rubbish. When you were called, hypothetically speaking, of course, for jury duty in order to fulfill your civic duty to this great country that we live in, it may or may not, hypothetically speaking, of course, be considered unreasonable to have people check in at 8 a.m. to then wait around for 2.5 hours and then be told, hey, we were just told by the judge, hypothetically, of course, that you should break for an extended lunch period and meet back here at 2 p.m. And then basically be there throughout this whole selection process, hypothetically, of course, until almost 5 o'clock. Is that unreasonable? Would you say that is an unreasonable thing to do? Is that true? Is that rubbish?
Yeah, I mean, I not knowing where this example could possibly be found, I'll say true. Yes, that is very unreasonable.
All, after all, can believe it. It was true.
It is true, isn't it? Oh, man. Yeah, I say hypothetical. I did say on Twitter that I was at jury duty. I did not give any specifics, as I was told many times by the clerks and judge, etc.
To not tweet about the case.
To not send any messages, accept any messages, including but not limited to chat rooms, tweeting, Facebook posts, TikTok, whatever. Yeah. Which, fair. I get it.
Chat rooms?
Chat rooms.
What is it?
Which, like,
they still think we use AIM here in the year 2024?
I mean, like, does Reddit count as a chat room, or is that more like a message board?
I never thought of it as a chat room. Maybe it is. Yeah, I don't know.
It's hard to say at this point.
Yeah.
Anyway, they're trying to just be vague and cover as many bases as possible while also still saying tweeting. Which, honestly, good for them that they say tweeting and not, like, posting on X, because then I would have actually... I'd like to think I wouldn't interrupt a judge at any point in my life. Hopefully I never get to that point in my life. There would have maybe been, like, a brief instinct that I would have had to fight to be like, actually, X is a really stupid thing to say. And I
think you can legally object. I think you can object, yes.
That is going to do it for us, folks. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on the Cover One Roundup. We are so glad to be getting closer and closer to football season. We are really looking forward to training camp starting up. If you are fans of this show and other things that Cover One does, hit that like button on your way out if you haven't done it already. Subscribe to this channel and share this episode along with others to your friends, enemies, lovers, neighbors, whoever you think would enjoy this show, and even those who you think might not enjoy this show. Maybe they'll enjoy a good hate listen every once in a while. Regardless of that, we really appreciate all of your support. It means a lot to us for all of you that come out and join our show. It's a lot of fun. We have fun doing this, and we'll have even more fun when we have actual football stuff to talk about. Again, the best way to support us here at Cover One is to subscribe to OnePass, which is our subscription service, if we want to call it that. Sure, let's call it that. Yeah. Is our subscription direct? It's the most direct way to support us. It's $60 a year for the best Bills content, the best group of Bills people to talk to on game day. Plus, you get a free shirt and a free decal. And who doesn't love stuff like that? We are also brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. Again, if you use promo code COVER1 with the number 1 to sign up and make your first deposit, Underdog will match that deposit up to $100. Fantasy football, along with actual football, is right around the corner. So if you're looking for something else to do this year for fantasy purposes, Underdog Fantasy is for you. Uber, where can the people find you?
At UberHansen on the old Twitter there. Just drunk tweeting constantly, but tweeting more about the Bills here starting like probably this week. Much more about the Bills and not hate tweeting Dolphins and Jaguars.
You can find me at DFAUXY or at DFoxy. I also tweet about the Bills along with other things. I also write for Bills. God, I can't even remember what it's called. What is it? What's the place we write for now? Uber.
Sports Illustrated.
It is Sports Illustrated, but like the specific site, like there's a weirdly
SI
specific
Bills dash something NFL dash. I don't know what the actual URL is.
Yeah,
We should probably find that.
We should find that out. We should be more knowledgeable about the place that we actually write for nowadays. But that might not.
SI.com/NFL/Bills.
Okay, there we go. The title that you see that I was looking for. Oh no, it is just that. It was called something else. It was called something else, and I was trying to think of that. It's Buffalo Bills on SI. So there you go. Find us on there. You'll find you've written on there. Yes, you haven't. You'll get there though. Yeah. Soon, because you've got your previews to do. Mm-hmm. I have written several pieces on there. I think they are all perfectly fine, and I would encourage you all to read them. And I'll have more throughout the season. So appreciate you all coming out. Appreciate you all supporting us. We will see you all next week, and we will have some kind of sort of football stuff to talk about, and it'll be a lot of fun. We will see you all next week. Bye-bye.